Across the stars, the silence of Earth had become a legend. For more than 500 years not a single human signal had been heard, not a single fleet had been seen, not a single ambassador had stepped into the great halls of the Galactic Council. Whole generations of alien leaders had grown old telling their children the same story. Humanity was gone, extinct, burned out by its own violence. For centuries that story was enough to keep the galaxy calm, but deep inside the archives of every great empire there remained one unspoken truth. Humans had not died easily, and if they had survived, their return would shake every civilization to its core. The first sign came quietly, almost too small to notice. A telescope station on the edge of the Velaran cluster picked up an energy flicker beyond the rim. At first the researchers thought it was nothing but a star's dying breath, but the frequency was wrong, too controlled, too deliberate. The scientist who saw it felt his skin crawl. He searched ancient databases and matched the signal pattern to a code that had not been seen in half a millennium. It was human. He reported it in a trembling voice, and within hours the data raced through the networks of the galaxy. Civilizations whispered in fear. Could it be possible? Could humans still exist? The Galactic Council assembled in emergency session for the first time in a century. Leaders of reptilian dynasties, insectoid hives, crystalline intelligences, and vast machine minds filled the chamber. Their voices clashed in panic. Some called for calm, claiming the data was flawed. Others shouted that if humans had survived, they would bring fire and chaos again. They remembered the wars when humanity's fleets, though fewer in number, fought with such fury that even empires larger by tenfold had bent under their will. The council voted to send a fleet to the edge of the rim, but before their ships even launched another message arrived. It was not words, not sound, only a faint beacon repeating again and again, a code burned into history, the old Terran distress call. Every alien officer who heard it felt their blood run cold. It was the same call that once echoed across dying battlefields when human soldiers fought to their last breath. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy felt the weight of fear. Rumors spread faster than light. Traders whispered that whole human fleets were hidden in deep voids, sleeping like beasts waiting to wake. Others said Earth itself still lived, covered in shields so strong no scan could pierce them. A few even believed humans had gone beyond the galaxy, only to return with new weapons. In the darkness of their war chambers, alien admirals studied the signal and saw one detail that made their hearts sink. The beacon was not fading. It was growing stronger, pulsing like a heartbeat. Something was awakening. On the observation decks of a lonely station, a young alien officer stood staring at the star map, watching the flicker spread. He thought of the stories told by his grandfather, who had fought against humans long ago and barely lived. His voice trembled as he whispered, "They were never extinct. They were only waiting." Far away in the cold of space, deep within a shattered asteroid field, a shadow moved. It was not a natural body, not a drifting rock. It was metal, ancient and scarred, vast as a city, and though silent for centuries it now stirred with life. Across its surface lights flickered one by one, like eyes opening after a long sleep. And somewhere inside that darkness a voice spoke, low and steady, the first human voice heard in 500 years, "If anyone hears this, we are not gone. We are coming back." The council chamber was a storm of voices, each one louder and more fearful than the last. News of the human distress signal had reached every corner of the galaxy, and panic was spreading faster than the diplomats could contain it. Empires that once stood united now accused one another of hiding secret alliances with the humans, of secretly feeding the ancient enemy during the centuries of silence. The insectoid ambassador hissed that the beacon must be destroyed at once, wiped from existence before it grew stronger. A crystalline being from the Vayari collective pulsed in calm rhythm, insisting that rash action would only awaken whatever lay beneath the stars. But beneath the arguments, one truth was clear: if humanity truly lived, no alien world would ever feel safe again. A decision was made in fear. A secret fleet would be dispatched to the edge of the rim, to investigate the source of the signal and, if necessary, erase it. The chosen fleet was no ordinary one. It was the Council's handpicked armada, forged from the best ships of 10 empires, armed with the deadliest technology known. Its mission was simple but heavy: approach the signal, identify the truth, and ensure humanity's silence remained eternal. The admirals who led them spoke bravely before their soldiers, but in the shadows their hands shook. They all remembered the stories of their ancestors, who had faced the humans and barely survived. They fight like fire, one admiral whispered to another in the hangar, and if even one of them still lives, we may not come home. The fleet departed, vanishing into the void where the signal pulsed like a heartbeat. Weeks passed as they cut through black space, until at last the source came into view. The system they entered was dead, its star a pale ghost of light, its planets nothing but shattered stone. Yet amid the ruins floated wreckage, endless fields of broken metal. At first it seemed to be nothing more than debris from some ancient war, but then the scans revealed something terrifying. The fragments were human. Every piece of shattered hull carried markings of Terran design, the same symbols carved into history books that children studied in fear. What froze the Admiral's blood was not that these ruins existed, but that many still pulsed with energy. Engines that should have gone cold centuries ago hummed faintly, as though waiting for a signal. The ships were not dead. They were sleeping. As the armada drew closer, the largest wreck turned slowly, like a drifting corpse. But when its surface caught the light of the dying star, the illusion broke. Beneath layers of dust and scars, the hull was intact. Towers rose like dark spires, weapon mounts glimmered with dormant power, and along its side burned faintly a name in ancient Terran script, Indomitable. The last recorded battles of humanity spoke of this ship, a flagship that vanished in the final war, thought destroyed in a blaze that took half a sector. Yet here it was, silent, waiting. Before the admirals could react, alarms rang across their bridges. The signal they had chased for weeks had changed. No longer a faint beacon, it was now a steady transmission pulsing with energy. Lights along the Indomitable's hull began to glow, one after another, like the awakening of some sleeping beast. Tremors shook the void as engines older than any alien empire roared to life. The fleet panicked, commanders shouting over each other, some ordering retreat, others demanding an immediate attack. But then a sound broke through every channel, a sound that silenced entire war rooms. A human voice. Calm. Cold. Commanding. "This is Admiral Reyes of the Terran fleet. Who dares wake us?" The words rolled across the void, sinking into the hearts of every alien officer who heard them. The accent was strange, aged by centuries, but the tone carried the same weight their ancestors had feared. Humanity was not gone. Humanity was here, alive, and speaking. The admirals froze, unsure whether to answer. Some whispered that perhaps this was a recording, an echo from the past. But then the voice returned, sharper this time. "We hear your fleets. We feel your fear. Know this, humanity did not die. We endured. We waited." As the word spread, the Indomitable's shadow grew vast, dwarfing the Council's fleet. The alien ships, though newer and armed with the latest technology, seemed fragile beside the colossal Terran warship. Its design was brutal, angular, built not for beauty but for war. And when its main cannons shifted, locking onto the alien armada, every admiral knew the truth. One ship alone could destroy them. Panic erupted. Some captains ordered retreat, their ships blinking out of the system in desperate jumps. Others stayed frozen, unwilling to make the first strike that might provoke the beast. And then the final horror came. Sensors flared with fresh signals, dozens of them. Across the system, wrecks once thought dead began to stir, lights awakening across their hulls. They were not wrecks at all. They were the rest of the human fleet. The admirals could not breathe. One whispered what all of them thought, but none dared say aloud, they were never extinct. They were preparing. In the council chamber light years away, the message from Admiral Reyes played again and again, and fear spread like fire. Whole civilizations trembled as they realized the truth. The silence of humanity had ended. The storm was about to begin. The galaxy was holding its breath. 4 days, every channel, every network, every whisper in dark corners carried the same message that had shaken the Council to its foundations. A human voice had spoken. Not a recording, not a fragment of old code, but a living commander of a living fleet. Admiral Reyes of the Terran fleet had returned from silence, and his words echoed through space like a thunderclap. Empires that had sworn humanity was extinct now scrambled to explain their lies. On Market World civilians panicked, buying weapons, hoarding supplies, convinced that human warships would descend upon them at any moment. On military stations young soldiers stared at their ancestors' old battle records and shivered at the thought of facing such an enemy. In the council chambers, chaos reigned. Leaders of the strongest races shouted over one another, arguing whether to negotiate, to flee, or to strike while the humans were still few in number. One delegate, an ancient reptilian lord whose people had once lost whole sectors to human fleets, slammed his claw against the table and demanded immediate war. "If they rise again," he roared, "none of us will survive." Others were less certain. The crystalline envoy of the Vayari spoke with pulsing calm, warning that humans might not seek conquest, but balance. If they waited all these centuries, the envoy said, it was not for mindless destruction. It was for something greater. Something patient. Still, fear outweighed reason, and fear painted humanity as an enemy. Meanwhile, in the dead system where the Indomitable had awakened, the Council's investigation fleet hovered in terrified silence. They had heard the voice. They had seen the giant ship stir from its long slumber. And now they watched in horror as more lights appeared across the void. Wreckage that had drifted for centuries revealed itself as dormant warships, each one vast, armored, and terrible. One by one, they came alive, like titans shaking off chains of stone. Engines flared, weapons aligned, and the stars themselves seemed to dim in their shadow. Then came the second message. Every listening station, every scout ship, every admiral frozen in dread heard it. The human voice returned, deeper, stronger, carrying the weight of command. "This is no ghost. This is no trick. We are the Terran fleet. We slept while you built your empires. We endured while you claimed we were gone. Now we awaken. We are not your enemy, unless you make us one." The words spread through the galaxy like a storm. Some took them as a threat. Others as a warning. And a few, in the deepest corners of the stars, felt hope. Not all races had hated humanity. Some remembered alliances, friendships forged in desperate wars long ago. For them, the return of the humans meant not destruction, but salvation from the tyranny of empires that had ruled unchecked for centuries. Back aboard the Indomitable, Admiral Reyes stood at the command deck, his eyes scanning the screens as the alien fleet hovered nervously outside weapons range. His crew, humans preserved through cryogenic slumber, were awakening one by one. Soldiers, engineers, tacticians, all veterans of the last Great War, reborn into a galaxy that had forgotten them. Reyes's voice was calm, but his heart burned with a storm. He remembered the war, the betrayal that had forced humanity to vanish into silence. He remembered the promises made before entering the long sleep, that one day, when the galaxy least expected, humanity would rise again. "Status of the fleet?" he asked. 74 ships online," replied his second officer, her voice steady though her hands trembled. "Another 30 awakening. Engines stable. Weapons functional. Shields at full capacity." Reyes nodded. "And the aliens?" "They are afraid, Admiral. Terrified. Half their fleet has already jumped away. The rest, they watch us, waiting." Reyes's gaze hardened. "Good. Let them watch. Let them see what we are." Across the void, alien admirals argued desperately over comms. Some begged to retreat, convinced any sudden move would provoke annihilation. Others demanded an attack, fearing that waiting would only allow more human ships to awaken. The debate tore their fleet apart. But before they could act, a sound shook their channels once more, a human broadcast, this time carrying not just words, but an image. The galaxy saw the Indomitable in full. Its black hull scarred but unbroken, its weapons glowing like the eyes of some ancient beast. Behind it loomed ship after ship, hundreds rising from the darkness. And then the image shifted to Earth itself, hidden under layers of shields, green and blue as though untouched by war, alive. The humans had never died. Their world still thrived, hidden, protected, waiting. Panic erupted. Civilizations thousands of light years away broke into riots at the sight of Earth. Propaganda crumbled, lies were exposed. The children who had grown up believing humanity was gone now realized their leaders had deceived them. Fear turned to chaos, and chaos spread like wildfire. Admiral Reyes's final words in the broadcast sealed the moment into history. "We return not as conquerors, but as survivors. Remember this, humanity kneels to no one. We never did. We never will." The Council fleet shivered under the weight of the message, caught between terror and awe. They had thought they had discovered a ghost, an echo of a dead enemy. But instead, they had awakened legends, and those legends were rising. And across the stars, every empire felt the same cold truth settle into their bones: humanity was back. And the galaxy would never be the same. Fear spread like a plague across the stars. The Council tried to contain it, but the message of Admiral Reyes had already escaped their control. On every world, on every station, the image of the awakened Terran fleet played again and again. Black ships older than most empires, scarred yet alive, burning with the promise of war. Entire civilizations who had sworn humanity was extinct now knew they had been deceived. Merchants abandoned trade routes, colonies rioted, and soldiers demanded answers from trembling commanders. The galaxy, once proud and stable, now shook under a single truth: the humans were back. On the Council homeworld, leaders convened in secret. The chamber was sealed, guards posted at every door, and still their voices trembled as they argued. One insectoid warlord demanded an immediate strike, to gather every fleet in the galaxy and burn the Terrans before they fully awoke. "Crush them now," he hissed, "before they crush us all." But a crystalline envoy pulsed with calm light, warning of the futility of such action. If even fragments of their fleet fought us centuries ago to a standstill, what will a fully awakened armada do to us now? The argument grew bitter. Some shouted for alliance, others for annihilation, but all felt the same sickness of fear. Meanwhile, word spread in the streets. On industrial moons, workers whispered of the humans who once freed slaves in the old wars. On agricultural colonies, peasants prayed to ancient shrines dedicated to Terran warriors who had defended them generations ago. Not everyone feared humanity's return. Some saw them as the only power strong enough to break the chains of the Council and its oppressive empires. Rebellion stirred quietly in the shadows, sparked not by propaganda, but by hope. Back in the dead system, the alien fleet still lingered before the Indomitable, but their courage was crumbling. Every hour more human ships awakened, drifting from the wreckage fields like leviathans shaking off sleep. The aliens counted dozens, then hundreds, each one as large as their strongest battleships. Even their youngest officers could see the truth written in the stars: the balance of power was already shifting. Humanity had not returned weak. They had returned prepared. Admiral Reyes knew this as well. On the bridge of the Indomitable, he watched reports scroll across the holo-displays. 93 ships online, his second officer announced. Weapons ready. Shields at full strength. More crews awakening every hour. Reyes stood tall, but his mind burned with memory. He had lived through the last war, had seen empires unite to destroy his people. He remembered burning worlds, shattered fleets, humanity forced to retreat into silence. They had endured, but they had never forgotten. "Transmit," Reyes ordered. His voice carried through the void, striking every alien channel. "To the Council, and to every world that listens, we are not here to conquer, but we will not kneel. You declared us extinct. You wrote lies into your histories. You told your children humanity was gone. Yet here we stand, stronger than before. We do not seek your submission. But know this: if you come for us, you will break." The message tore through the galaxy like lightning. On distant worlds, civilians cheered in secret, daring to hope. On Council-controlled planets, riots flared hotter, citizens chanting that their rulers had hidden the truth for too long. And in military halls, commanders struggled to keep discipline as soldiers whispered of the old stories: the human fleets that had fought like fire, the human soldiers who never surrendered. The fear that once kept the galaxy united now threatened to tear it apart. The Council's response came swift and furious. In a hidden chamber, the most powerful admirals of the great empires signed a secret order: the creation of a combined armada, larger than any seen in history. Its mission was simple: destroy humanity before their fleets fully awakened. The order was carried in silence, but spies carried whispers back to the humans. Reyes read the report without surprise. "They will come," he said softly. "They always come. They cannot let us live." His officers looked at him with both fear and pride. Humanity had faced this before, and survived. Now they would face it again, not as the hunted, but as legends risen from the grave. In the shadows of the galaxy, other powers stirred. Smaller civilizations, tired of Council domination, began sending secret messages to the humans. Offers of alliance, of resources, of information. Not everyone wanted to see humanity destroyed. Some wanted to see them rise. Reyes listened, choosing carefully, his mind always on the larger war. The galaxy is already dividing, he told his officers. Soon they will turn their weapons on us. When they do, some will break away. We must be ready to catch them when they fall. And then came the final spark that ignited the galaxy's fear into frenzy. Council scouts, desperate to prove the humans weak, launched a reckless raid on a small Terran ship just as it awakened. They fired first, unleashing volleys meant to cripple it before it could power its shields. But the human vessel, though old, was no fragile relic. Its defenses roared to life, its cannons unleashed, and in less than a minute the Council scouts were nothing but debris. The recording of that battle spread faster than light. Billions watched as a single Terran warship annihilated a squadron of the Council's finest with brutal efficiency. No tricks, no mercy, only overwhelming force. The message was clear: if the galaxy came for humanity, they would pay in blood. On every world, in every empire, the same question was whispered in terror and awe. If one ship could do this, what would 100 do? What would 1,000? And far away, aboard the Indomitable, Admiral Reyes stood before the stars, his voice quiet but steady. They will bring their greatest armada, he said. And when they do, we will show them why humanity was never meant to die. The largest armada in galactic history gathered on the edge of Council space. Thousands of ships from a dozen empires formed into endless battle lines, their hulls glinting like blades under the cold light of distant suns. Flagships bristling with weapons, carriers heavy with fighters, cruisers fitted with experimental cannons, every ship that could be spared had been called. Admirals spoke with voices of steel, proclaiming that this was the moment to end humanity forever, to strike before the Terran fleet fully awoke. But beneath their grand speeches, their soldiers felt only dread. They had seen the recordings, they had watched the Indomitable and her sisters rise from silence, and deep inside they knew this would not be an easy victory. In the streets of their homeworlds, citizens prayed. Some begged for their fleets to return victorious, others prayed for mercy from the humans they had once believed extinct. Fear had shattered the illusion of unity. But still, the Council pressed forward, for they believed that to do nothing was worse than to face the storm. Meanwhile, in the dead system where the Terran fleet gathered, the humans watched. Admiral Reyes stood at the heart of the Indomitable's command deck, his eyes fixed on the displays as sensors tracked the approaching armada. They come with everything they have, his second officer reported, voice tight with awe. Thousands of ships. Entire sectors emptied to form this force. Reyes nodded, calm as stone. Good, he said. Let the galaxy witness this day. They think us relics. Let them see what legends truly are. Around him, the Terran fleet pulsed with new life. More than 200 ships now drifted in formation, each one a survivor of the old war, scarred but whole. Their hulls were thick with ancient armor, their weapons crude in design compared to modern alien technology, yet terrifying in their sheer power. They were built in an age when humanity fought wars of extinction, when compromise was weakness and survival meant fire. The galaxy had forgotten that truth. Now it was about to be reminded. When the Council Armada finally arrived, the stars lit with their numbers. Alien admirals broadcast ultimatums, their voices trembling beneath layers of false pride. Surrender your weapons, they demanded, or be annihilated. Reyes answered with silence. Then the first shot came, not from the humans, but from the Council. A spear of plasma streaked across the void, slamming against a Terran cruiser. The ship trembled but held, its ancient shields flaring with light. For a moment the galaxy froze, waiting. Then Reyes gave the order. Fire! The void erupted. Human weapons thundered to life, cannons that bent gravity itself, lances that tore through shields like paper, railguns that hurled slugs the size of buildings. The first wave of the Council's fleet shattered under the assault, ships ripped apart in seconds. Entire squadrons vanished in fire. But the Council's numbers were vast, and soon the battle became a storm. Fighters swarmed the Terran lines, cruisers pounded with relentless barrages, dreadnoughts fired beams that carved holes through human shields. Space burned with explosions, debris spinning like ash in a hurricane. The humans fought like they had centuries before, with fury, with precision, with a refusal to break. Where a ship fell, another filled the gap. Where an alien fleet pressed hardest, the Indomitable herself appeared, unleashing weapons that turned armadas to dust. Reyes stood unmoving, his voice calm as he issued orders. Hold the line. Push them back. Show them who we are. But the Council was desperate. They unleashed weapons forbidden by treaty, planet-cracking missiles, black hole torpedoes, storms of antimatter. Whole sectors of space twisted under the assault. Human ships burned, yet they did not fall easily. Even when torn open, they fought to the last, their crews firing until their final breath. The galaxy watched in horror and awe as a handful of human ships destroyed fleets 10 times their size. Still, the battle raged, neither side willing to yield. The Council's numbers pressed like an ocean, drowning the Terrans in fire. Reyes knew they could not hold forever. Then came the moment that turned the tide. From the depths of the system, a shadow rose. It was not a ship in the normal sense, but a weapon of legend, a relic whispered about even among humans, the Leviathan. A battleship so vast it was said to carry the strength of a fleet within its hull. For centuries it had slept beneath layers of rock, hidden by human engineers before the long silence. Now it emerged, engines blazing, weapons glowing with power not seen in half a millennium. The Council Armada faltered. Sensors screamed warnings as the Leviathan's cannons powered up, each one capable of tearing through entire battle groups. Then it fired. The blast tore through the Council center, annihilating dozens of ships in a single strike. Panic rippled through their fleets. Admirals screamed orders, but their soldiers hesitated, terror drowning their discipline. The humans pressed forward, their fleet roaring in the Leviathan's shadow, carving through the broken armada. Hours passed, battles fought across burning fields of wreckage. At last, the Council's great armada broke. Ships fled in every direction, discipline shattered, admirals silenced. The humans stood victorious, scarred but unbroken, their ships drifting amid the ruins of thousands. Across the galaxy, the message was clear. The Council had gathered the greatest fleet in history, and it had shattered like glass before the Terran return. Humanity was not just alive. They were unstoppable. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Admiral Reyes stood in silence, staring at the stars littered with debris. His voice was low but carried the weight of prophecy. They thought they could erase us. Now they see the truth. We are not the past. We are the future. And in the shadows of distant worlds, rulers trembled. Some plotted surrender, others whispered alliance, but all understood one truth. The galaxy had awakened the very force it had feared for centuries. Humanity had returned, and their war had only begun. The ruins of the Council's great armada drifted across the void like a shattered crown. Thousands of wrecks spun slowly in the darkness, broken fragments of the largest fleet ever assembled. Fires still burned in the husks of dreadnoughts, and the cries of survivors echoed across comm channels, unanswered. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy's rulers looked upon their forces and saw not strength, but weakness. The Terran fleet had endured their full fury, and prevailed. News of the battle spread faster than light. Entire worlds rose in panic or awe. On Council-loyal colonies, fear turned into chaos as citizens demanded to know why their leaders had provoked the humans. In hidden corners of the galaxy, oppressed species celebrated in secret, whispering that perhaps humanity's return was their chance at freedom. Old songs were sung again, songs of human soldiers who once stood beside the weak, fighting against empires that had enslaved them. Humanity was no longer a myth. They were alive, and they were rising. Aboard the Indomitable, Admiral Reyes stood in silence, gazing at the debris fields. His officers moved quietly around him, repairing systems, awakening more ships, tending to wounded crews. The battle had cost them dearly, but their victory was undeniable. Reyes's eyes narrowed as he studied the reports streaming in from across the stars. The Council was broken, but not defeated. New fleets were being raised in desperation, even as their governments struggled to hold themselves together. Worse, whispers spread of weapons being unearthed, forgotten technologies buried in vaults so dangerous even the Council had sworn never to use them. Humanity's return had driven the galaxy into madness. "Admiral," his second officer said softly, "messages are flooding in. Not from the Council, from others. Smaller powers. Worlds tired of living under their rule. They beg for alliance. They want us to lead them." Reyes turned slowly, his gaze steady. "And what do you think?" The officer hesitated, then spoke. "If we refuse them, the Council will crush them. If we accept, We become more than survivors. We become rulers. The word hung in the air like a blade. Reyes remembered the last time humanity had been called conquerors. He remembered burning worlds, desperate enemies, and the terrible cost of victory. He clenched his fists. We are not rulers, he said finally. We are guardians. If they seek freedom, they will stand beside us, not beneath us. Even as he spoke, a new transmission cut through the noise. It was not from a desperate world or a broken fleet. It came from the far edge of known space, from a signal buried deep beneath layers of encryption. The voice that emerged was calm, but heavy with warning. You are not alone, Terrans. While you slept, others moved. There are forces beyond this galaxy, stronger than the Council, hungrier than your old enemies. They know you are awake now. And they are coming. The bridge went silent. Officers stared at one another, faces pale. Reyes's jaw tightened as he absorbed the words. Humanity had always believed the galaxy was the stage of their greatest struggle. But now he saw the truth. This was only the beginning. Trace it, Reyes ordered. Find where that signal came from. Already trying, sir, a technician replied, hands flying across the console. It's fragmented, scattered across relay stations. Whoever sent it knew how to hide. Reyes turned back to the stars, his mind racing. If what the voice claimed was true, then the Terran fleet had awoken just in time, not to reclaim the galaxy, but to prepare it. The Council thought the humans were their greatest threat, but perhaps they, too, were about to face an enemy none of them could stand against alone. Back on the Council's homeworld, fear drove rulers to desperate measures. Some plotted one last united strike against humanity, others whispered of surrender, and a few dared to consider alliance. But every decision was shadowed by the same realization: their armada was gone, their unity shattered. They had awakened a force they could not destroy. Across the galaxy, rebellions lit like wildfire. On mining moons and trade hubs, banners of resistance rose, many marked with an old human symbol, the Eagle of Earth, remembered only in secret histories. Humanity had not asked for followers, but they were gaining them. Not through conquest, but through fear of the Council and faith in the strength of those who had risen from extinction. On the Indomitable's bridge, Reyes gathered his officers. The galaxy sees us as a threat, he said, his voice steady. Let them. Fear will keep them cautious. But we must not become what they claim we are. We did not survive 5 centuries of silence to conquer the weak. We survived to ensure survival itself. He paused, then added, and if there are enemies beyond this galaxy, greater than any we have faced, then we must be ready to stand, not alone, but as leaders of a new alliance. His words carried across the fleet, stirring soldiers who had fought through hell itself. They had believed their long sleep would end in vengeance. Instead, it would end in something greater, a new war, a new purpose, a new chance to shape the stars. Far across the void, in the black between galaxies, shadows stirred. Vast shapes moved in silence, watching the signals of the awakened Terran fleet. Their forms were hidden, their weapons unknown, but their intent was clear. They were coming. Humanity had returned not to die, not to kneel, and not to conquer. They had returned to lead. And as Admiral Reyes looked into the endless night, he whispered the words that would echo through history. The galaxy thought our silence was extinction. They were wrong. Our silence was preparation. Now the real war begins.